Welcome to a grand adventure into the belly of the beast. No, my name's not Jonah. I'm Michael Barone, the Pipe Dreams guy. Mostly a Minnesotan these days, but I grew up in Pennsylvania and now and then need to come back to visit the great department store built by John Wanamaker, and I'd tip my hat to you, sir, if I were wearing one, in which he housed, with unique vision, and just a stone's throw from City Hall, what was and has remained the world's largest playable musical instrument, the Wanamaker organ. It's an old Philadelphia tradition to meet at the Eagle in the Grand Court. This impressive bronze statue, which, like the organ itself, was brought by Mr. Wanamaker to Philadelphia from the 1904 St. Louis Exposition. Kurt and I converged at the Eagle and then began our adventure.
Well, here's our rogues gallery that shows some of the shots of the instrument when it was in its original home and being built at the factory in Los Angeles. There's low C of the 32-foot double open, which doesn't have a lot of room in front of its mouth, but amazingly speaks very, very well in the room. As you can see above you, there's an entire chest. This is the main pedal chest of the original Los Angeles organ. And if you look at the timbers that are supporting it, they need to be quite stout because we have tons and tons of weight on us up here between the chest and the wooden opens and all the reeds and everything. So it's quite a heavy chest. There's a forest of wood above us. And as you can see, the boys are in the process. This is Anthony and Edward, and what they're doing is going through and checking each pneumatic to make sure that the screw that holds the pneumatic against the air system is tight so it doesn't leak. And he is checking every one of the pouches to make sure none of them are damaged or leaking. So it's a very tedious process, but extremely important to make the instrument reliable for the artist's fingers.
If there were a damaged pouch, it would be unscrewed and brought
Yes.
out and worked. And how many of these have had that replacement work done on their leathers?
That's a good question. Edward, who's been doing most of the chest work, how many of the Fleming actions have you actually had to replace, would you say?
Not that many. Most of this entire division has pneumatics that were made of a really wonderful material called polylon that we can't really get anymore. It's not made the same way, so it's not as supple and not as strong. But many of the older ones are made of a very thin CPL leather, and they can get damaged over time and get a lot of dirt in them. So you can see that one's been totally blown out. Some damage like this where the leather just splits because it's just been moved so many times and it eventually dries out. In this whole division so far, we've checked about 2/3 of it, and there's only been 5 or 6 that have needed to be replaced.
Out of hundreds.
Out of a couple of thousand actually in this division.
All right, let's open this up and you can see how a diaphone works as a valvular reed as opposed to a regular reed. This is the body of the bottom of the diaphone, and you can see there's a very heavy-duty attachment of what looks like a car spring, because it actually is the same kind of metal, and attached to it is the metal round valve. This is open underneath the valve and has leather so that it can seal properly, and when you let the wind into here, this operates, which I'll try to show you with my hand, and you can see how it flexes and moves, and I, pulling with all my strength, cannot get it to seat. But at 25 inches of pressure, the inrush of air creates a vacuum and also pressure on the outside of it that closes it. Once it closes, it's relaxed again and pops open, and that very ingenious vibration back and forth due to the length of this and the weight determines the pitch that it's playing at.
With big organs, there's always a joke that the specification is so large that it includes everything but the kitchen sink. As you can see, in the Wanamaker organ, we have provided for every eventuality. And the soap dispenser, too.
All right, now let's go up the staircase on this side of the organ. There are 5 levels to go through, so let's get started.
So the closed grade are these 2 chests.
Right here with, as always, the shared primary underneath us, which is why we have the big walkboard. And we've done a lot of restoration of the pipework in here and cleaned it up because it's a very useful part of the Great Division. Plus, this is a wonderful battery of 16 foot here and 3 8-foots of reeds that are quite lovely.
And the 16-foot does not go full length straight. There is a certain amount of interesting plumbing so that the resonator does not exceed the dimension of the available space. So although we look to be in an enclosed box, these slats here are the expression shutters for the front of the enclosed grid.
Now what we'll do is I have someone at the console so that we can let people see how the swell shades work. If you go ahead and open them slowly. See, that's all the sound. Close them.
Before leaving this area, we should point out the beautiful harp percussion, which is hanging up at the top of this chamber. It's difficult to see or film, but we have this still picture of it taken during its installation.
Now, these, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is almost 100% lead.
Yes.
Oh, man.
You can't get tone like that without it.
Yeah, knock on this pipe. Just, yeah, and look how thick the walls are. And this is a double languid diapason, and if you look in there you can see the usual languid at the bottom and then a second one arched above it. And Kurt, the reason for this is?
It is to be able to excite the pipe tremendously under high pressure, and it's always felt that it's an inside bridge, is the best way to describe it. It takes the excitement from the front of the mouth, puts it to the back of the column of air inside the pipe, and therefore gives you tremendous greater strength of tone while driving it much harder than you'd be able to get away with.
Okay, shall I guess that there is a very strong fundamental to these? Because these are almost flute scale.
You know, you would expect that, but the beauty of the double languid is there's an incredible spray of upper harmonics, and it gives the diapason this wonderful English but yet bright diapason sound for something so big and so powerful.
What's the wind pressure on this?
18 inches.
And I'm going to guess that if you hold it and I try to blow, I won't make a hoot. Actually, I will.
But you can hear how powerful it is.
Yes, it takes all of me and then some.
Quite amazing. I've been here before.
So is this the speakeasy?
Yes.
Vox Humanas, a sea of them. Good heavens.
Yes, we're very proud of this. This was one of the major restorations that we did as part of the restoration of the whole orchestral chamber. This is the original chamber, except that it goes back another 20 feet.
Yeah, this wall was not here.
That's correct. And this chest was all the way at the back of the chamber, and then the rest of the orchestral is in front of it, and you only have this opening for the entire chamber.
So these are the swell shades for this chamber.
Which was disastrous for such a big, deep chamber, and therefore they never heard the orchestral, and when it stopped working, they left it not working for 30 years.
And were there these many boxes originally?
We added one box, but yes, this entire set was here, but we were able to get a box of that period. These are all Godfrey, by the Godfrey Company, and slightly different vowel sounds and different scales, and originally we're all on one reservoir. What we did is, you can see the breaks here, every two now are fed with their own air and have their own primitive system, and that's how you really create the chorus effect. I'm going to pull one of these out because this is a very unusual pipe. I think the flat was done more for decoration.
Okay, this is interesting. What is usually a cylindrical pipe has a flat front. And this is a what?
This is a Nazard Gamba.
To get to the next part of the organ, we picked our way across a rather precarious route over the top of the main pedal. First, stopping to admire a recent addition.
We're looking at our new reiterating cymbal, which was designed by Kenny Crome and very kindly given to us as a gift by Lynn Larson, our theater organist here, who I think is probably one of the best in the world. This is a very interesting device in that it starts softly with a roll and then gets louder and louder and is very orchestral in effect.
Let's try this one. Ah, and there's the doppel. Mouth here, little hole in the stopper.
And one of the reasons why they did experimental ranks like this is because they were building the largest organ in the world, and other builders have tried different things like this, and I'm sure Odsley said, this is what I want. I want a combination of these two voices, and you can blow on it if you wish because it's 6 inches and rather easy to create the sound.
Patented August 9th, 1898.
Over to the main pedal division, which is split with the C in the back and C sharp in the front, kind of weirdly. So we tend to have the C side a little muffled instead of being turned sideways, but it's because the division was so big, this was the best way for them to squeeze it in here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're with me because I've run out of breadcrumbs.
This is the euphonium, which is one of the free reeds of the instrument. And by the way, the reed is not free, it's actually very expensive. But we call it free because instead of beating against a shallot, as a normal reed does, it's actually a free reed that can go both sides of the opening. Very similar to the harmoniums and small reed organs that a lot of churches had. This is how they made their sound. And it still is tuned on the wire, but as you can see, it goes all the way through the slot to the other side and creates a very characteristic sound of free reeds.
You know, I knew the organ was big, but I didn't realize it had its own post office.
It kind of looks like that, doesn't it? Actually, this is very important because, as you know, we have the symphonic organ symposiums, and the guys who come and very kindly have donated and made such a world of difference in the condition of the instrument, they don't live with it. And so for them to familiarize themselves with the instrument, they have an entire listing of every rank on the organ, of the wires on the tutti, the wires on the console, so that they can test things, but it lets them know where everything is and how they can find things throughout the whole organ. And we have every division laid out for that purpose so that they can grab something if they need a little education to find out where something is.
Well, looking at the number of compartments here and realizing even though we have gone through so much, it's apparent that there's still more of the organ to be seen.
Oh, very much so. And we're entering the main blower. Here we are in the main blower room.
So this is the hurricane and this is the tsunami. We've seen so much of the backstage of the organ, but this is what makes it happen. This multi-manual console with an incredible number of stops, and this magical man, Peter Richard Conti, who is the Wanamaker organist, and under his fingers the extraordinary potential of the instrument is realized. Good morning. It's always wonderful to have you in my vicinity. There's also one that allows you to control tremolo.
There is. This organ has 2 variable speed tremolos per division, and they're controllable by the expression shoes if you so choose.
Can we hear what?
Sure. So you can just like an orchestral player would do, you could put on a big flute, and as you make a crescendo, you can also make a tremolo increase. It's a very orchestral device.
Okay, color coding here. I know some people, when they hear music, they see colors. Is that the relationship here? Or is the orchestral division making you see blue skies?
Blue? Well, yeah, it does actually. It's an amazing sound. But the logic behind this is each division has its own color coding. So the orchestral is blue, and everything to orchestral or from orchestral is blue. So all the couplers, you can see, are split. The great is white. So if you want to bring orchestral to great, it's blue to white. Orchestral to ethereal, ethereal is a brown color, so it would be blue to brown. And everything that's split in half like that is a coupler or a percussion that floats around. So it's a very logical way to manage such a massive instrument with so many stop changes.
And I see these interesting little brass tracks here.
These are very unique to this instrument. These are called thumb slides, and what they enable the organist to do is, if your feet are both occupied playing the pedal board actual notes and you cannot actually access the swell shoes, you can still affect a crescendo by moving your thumb along one of these brass bars. And these work in parallel with the swell shoes to control the expression devices. You can couple any of the expressive divisions to any of these slides. It's a brilliant system.
And you don't always play on a single keyboard simultaneously. You are often on 2 keyboards at once and sometimes on 3 or 4.
Many times, especially if you're working with an orchestral transcription, you're required to what's called thumb down and actually play a solo tune with your thumb on an adjoining keyboard. And this instrument is designed in such a way, the keyboards are closer together in both this dimension and this dimension, that you can actually thumb down with quite ease, very much ease, even to the point of thumbing down and skipping a keyboard if you had to. No other console that I know of allows you to do that kind of thing.
The sound of a pipe organ comes from its pipes. And there are 2 basic families. There are flues and reeds. The flues are like whistles. The reeds, I think of them as buzzers of a kind. And in the flue family, there are diapasons, flutes, and strings. And the reeds, well, many, many options. But why don't we take a look at some individual pipes and just delineate what makes a diapason different from a string, what makes a flute different from a trumpet. Right. Why don't we pull a diapason out of this box here and take a look at it. This is a pretty hefty pipe, but as you can see, it is metal.
And if you can get a close-up here, you'll see OP, standard nomenclature for open diapason, and this is the G sharp. You can see it's quite fat. The cut-up isn't too high, which is the distance from the languid to the top of the mouth itself.
Okay, why don't we take a look inside right here, because this is what makes the whistle work. The wind comes up from the toe, the wind sheet is created here. There is a blockage, the languid, which covers the circumference of the pipe with the exception of this opening where the wind comes up. It hits the upper lip. Okay, well, let's see what a sort of G sharp. Okay, why don't you hold this pipe for just a minute? I'm going to go over here and grab another.
Sure.
That looks sort of like a principle that's gone on a Jenny Craig diet.
And I'll move like this.
So here we are, pipes of approximately the same length and generally the same physical characteristics. Cone-shaped toe, mouth at the flue, the resonating body above, cylindrical metal. But what's the difference? Thin. And this little device here, we'll talk about that in a moment, but just to compare the sound, you heard the voo of the diapason. This is the string. More harmonic development and a tighter, more grainy quality of tone.
We always use human qualities to describe the parts of the organ because that's just always been the way it is. So this is the mouth. This is a beard, just like someone would be having a beard in the front of their mouth, and ears, and the lower lip and upper lip. And the purpose of the beard is, once again, to control the wind sheet and make it more efficient. You purposely, you might say, overblow strings. In other words, you give them more power than you normally would on a pipe. And the beard allows you to do that by controlling the wind sheet and keeping it from losing its function. So what happens is, with that extra oomph, you're able to create all that upper harmonic and make the pipe a lot louder and more efficient than it would be without the beard. We have a wooden pipe, which of course you have the same thing. I'll turn it sideways so you can see it. There's your ears, beard, The mouth, just like a metal pipe, except that everything is made out of wood. And this tends to create a very smooth, flute-like sound.
So these are the flues of the organ. The other basic family is reeds, and right next door we have some reeds. Okay, now here we have a larger example of a reed pipe that's broken down. Why don't you pull the active end, and I'll pull a resonator out here, and this is pretty impressive stuff.
Yes, this is a practical thing, which makes sense. When your resonators get really big, you separate them from the boots just so that you can easily move them or do work on them. And it just makes it easier for the technician when he's operating.
Right, if you needed to get inside, as you were about to have all of this on top of here,
right,
and unseparatable would be very impractical. But first you remove this, then you can get to the action bit.
And you can see it's just like the Vox Humana, except that this has a shorter boot and
a longer resonator.
And you'll notice the length of the reed is increased, and it's quite easy to see how it moves up and down. And then weight is added to it so that you can get an even lower frequency. Once again, you're adding mass and slowing things down.
What is this stuff?
This is the oboe.
Uh-huh.
And once again, it's to be imitative of the oboe of the orchestra.
It could be a trumpet if there were not a cap on top.
That's correct.
But we have a
when
closed top.
And you'll notice it's very thin. Therefore, that tends to create a lot of upper harmonic. And as we know, the oboe has that kind of effect with much upper harmonics. This is what I call an affectation, because a lot of builders don't do this, and it just depended upon the voicer and whether he thought the whole would help in the speech. Obviously, this is where the sound comes out. It's created by the reed, goes up through the resonator. The resonator shapes and creates the tone, and this will change pitch when you lower it, just like when you lower a regular labial pipe, as we call it, which is one that doesn't use a reed. When you shorten it, you're going to raise the pitch. But interestingly, in reeds, and a very important thing to keep in mind, when you open this up more, you increase volume. So this is how we go through, and we can play a rank from bottom to top and try to make it sound like one pipe is simply changing pitch and has the same character and the same volume. And in a really good organ, the most important thing to care about is dirt. The slightest speck of dirt will stop this reed from functioning, because it'll hold it from completely sealing against the metal, which is very important in its operation.
I've heard what may be the apocryphal story that to clean the backside of a reed tongue, you use a new $2 bill.
Yes, because dollar bills do not deteriorate and slough off anything from their material. Where regular paper and other materials that you might think is clean, small particles of the paper will come off. A dollar bill has enough rag content that it really stays together and doesn't leave anything behind. And because it's a little rough, because of the rag content, it tends to polish and clean while you're pulling it through the reed.
Okay, but the use of a $2 bill is not an essential part of that process?
No, you can use, if you have a $100 bill, you're more than welcome to use it for cleaning reeds if you would like.
And leave it behind afterwards in the chamber.
Yes.
For
the
application. Yes, exactly, as a tip.
That's the least you can do.
Not one, but two.
That's to keep the pipes from getting away. So now we're walking into the string chamber. There are 3 divisions, and the bass piper just tends to block out each division one from the other, which kind of makes it nice so that we can separate the swell shapes somewhat and actually be able to bring up the cellos as compared to the muted viols that are on this side and the dulcienas on the far end. So, and we do allow the system to do that. If we wish to separate the cellos from the rest, we can do that electrically, which allows it to be extremely flexible. The chamber is about 67 feet long and about 27 feet wide, and is the largest single chamber in the world. And of course, this is the largest string division of any instrument in the world.
And there surely are a lot of them. And they identify themselves as strings by being very, very thin, small-scaled, narrow relative to their length. And they work in what fashion? We have unison pitches and then off unison pitches.
That's correct. Traditionally, it was unison pitch with below unison and above unison. And after experimentation, we found that unison pitch, slightly sharp and then more sharp, tends to give more life to the strings and the kind of buoyancy that Peter needs for his playing for the orchestral transcriptions. This is all the muted viols, which are probably, I think, some of the prettiest strings in the instrument in terms of giving that ethereal effect that everybody loves. And then over in the other division, opposite on this side, are the deep, rich cellos that are very characteristic and very imitative, that Peter uses a great deal in more solo work.
The orchestral division, if you remember previous comments, was buried in the main part of the organ before, and all of these luscious solo voices were very difficult to hear effectively. Through the marvels of diplomacy, you might say, it was possible for this space to be provided as a new chamber for the organ. And here we are in the midst of things. This is a tuning keyboard. We've talked about those before, which allows the individual ranks here to be played and serviced without needing to be walkie-talkie down to the main console. Okay, now where next?
We're going to go up to the seventh floor. We're now on the fourth, where the most powerful portion of the organ is, which is the ethereal.
Okay, the ethereal division, this must be heaven, is that the deal?
Exactly.
Okay, we're now on floor 7, and if we step back and look over here, this wooden forest of short, fat trunks over there, that's the clear flute, right?
Yes, that's probably the most famous rank on the organ, because everyone has heard the clear flute in the grand court, and it's a wonderful orchestral but yet lilting flute that just takes your breath away because of the spray of upper harmonics in it. And the way they did that was to have a very big scale that still could control itself, but then blow the heck out of it on 25 inches and go to the upper harmonic. And it's quite a sound. It's not very pretty in here, and it's very loud, but you need that kind of sound to go through the forest of wood that are the swell shades and get out into the room itself and command it.
Here we are in the crow's nest, or the nosebleed section. I suppose it's only a nosebleed if I stick my nose in front of one of these. This is the Centennial Tuba, which is the birthday present for the Wanamaker organ's 100th anniversary, and has just recently been installed. And behind the Centennial Tuba,
Hiding behind me, this is the wonderful largest set of Deagon chimes in the country. These were made to be bells for outside in church steeples, but because of the scale of the grand court, the guys that were in charge here thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a beautiful, big, you almost would say Borden set of bells that would be appropriate for the space.
of course, all of this is simply stuff. This is a machine, a tool. The term organ derives from the Greek for a tool. And this is a tool which is used twice a day whenever the store is open. The public is invited to hear the Wanamaker organ whenever you feel the urge. And this tool will be used by Peter Richard Conti, one of the most incredible musicians in the world, who knows what every stop tab means what every pipe sounds like and how to blend them in a marvelous and magical way.